Hi, and welcome back to One Trick Luxem. Today I want to talk about the concept of deck ratios and player preference. What does it mean when someone says that they build a deck more aggressively or defensively or to their own playstyle? Before I jump into my personal Grand Archive deck profile, I wanted to talk about TCGs in general and how ratios and statistics help players achieve their goals. So in front of us, we have a pie chart breaking down a typical 60 card deck. If you take a 60 card deck and you choose 20 of those cards to be of a certain engine, a certain concept, of a certain type, 20 out of 60 is 33%. So a third of your deck is dedicated to that one section or typing or what have you. If you open a card, well, if you open a 6-card hand, the likelihood is that you'll open 2 of these cards because every single card in your deck has a 33% chance of being that card in your opening hand. Likewise, if you have 15 cards attributed to a certain effect or concept or card type, you have a 25% chance of every card in your deck being that particular effect or engine piece. Lastly, if you have allocated packets of 6-card engine slots, it means that these are taking up 10% of your deck slot. If you open a hand of 6 cards, half of a card will be that, which basically means that if you open 12 cards, if you see 12 cards in your opening hand, you'll probably see 1 of these particular engine pieces. Before I jump into why ratios, I want to talk about player preference and TCG history as a whole. Let's move away from Grand Archive for a second. Let's go into Yu-Gi-Oh! Even if you've never played Yu-Gi-Oh, you've probably heard of Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you have no experience with the game, don't worry. I'm just going to walk you through a particular time in history. Here we have Salamangreat Gazelle. It's part of an archetype called the Salamangreats. When these came out in the TCG, a lot of players were deck building around this particular archetype, and it was colloquially called Salad. The deck is called Salad, and the reason why it's called Salad is because everyone has their own spin on the deck. Everyone likes their salad a different way. Some people make their Caesar salad with lots of croutons. Some people make their Caesar salad with lots of Parmesan cheese. Some people don't use romaine. Some people use different types of lettuce, but at the end of the day, the core concept of a Salamangreat or a salad deck profile was still the same. You had roughly the same 8 cards. You had roughly the same 50% or more so engine slot pieces, exactly the same across all deck lists. You can't have a salad without vegetables. You can't really call it a salad without some sort of dressing, and so on and so forth. And then if you move on to a different card game, let's talk about Magic. Magic, when we talk about more the Commander format, more so than Standard, it'll make a little bit more sense here. In Commander, we have the concept of a engine piece and a payoff. If you have too many engine pieces and no payoff, you're durdling and you're not doing anything all game. If you have too much payoff and not enough engine piece, then you're not going to be able to achieve that payoff consistently. So you have to abide by the rule of ratios when it comes to card games in general. And that is true of Grand Archive as well. In Grand Archive, there are cards you want to see early game but not late game, such as Angelic Channeling. How many of those do you run? What's correct? What's incorrect? Well, the answer, as I'm sure you'll hate, is it depends. But not just it depends on the meta, not just it depends on what kind of build you want, it depends on you as a player, as a person, as to what you want to see coming out of your deck. So let's jump into this, shall we? I'm going to move this piece of paper aside so we can reference it later. But let's jump into that Fire Luxem Zander deck profile that I always reference. Here we're going to start us off with 4 Dungeon Guide. The most important card in our deck, we always want to maximize it. Then we go into our engine piece. For Creative Shock. Creative Shock is a +1. I don't have to talk too much about it, but it's always paired with at least 8, if not 10, floating memory. And the floating memory of my choice here is 4 angelic channeling and 4 gentle respite. Why have I chosen these? The reason is because gentle respite works outside of creative shock. If you open a hand and you only have 1 floating memory and you're going first, you want that card to be gentle respite. You must see it on turn 1 specifically. Turn 2, 3, 4, and onwards, it starts to become dead, and we can't risk that. So we must maximize this all the time to 4 pieces. I've tested angelic channeling ratios, but generally I like these at 4. The reason is because it is also a piece that you must see early in the game. If you see an angelic channeling late game, it's dead. So to maximize the chance of us seeing it at the very first, second, or third turns of the game, we have these. And the thing about fire, and the reason why we can do this in this element, is because we have access to creative shock. If we didn't have creative shock, all of these dead cards would be particularly dead in the late game. We can only afford these ratios in fire. If you're in water and you have an angelic channeling draw late game, you can't really recycle that in any meaningful way. You have to use it as cost, as mana, and that just feels really, really bad. So for the purposes of this deck profile, we're on this particular engine. Notice how this engine is very short and succinct. It is 16 cards. If we take a look into our little pie chart here, this is 25% of our deck. This means that we have a 25% chance of opening a piece of this in our opening hand. And if we glimpse deep enough, we'll probably get close to 2 of these pieces in our opening hand, which is exactly what we want to see. We want to see a creative shock plus float. We want to see a dungeon guide for sure. Sometimes we don't see a dungeon guide, and that's okay, we'll dig for it. But essentially, a quarter of our deck is already allocated to this engine. Moving forward, we have our Luxem engine. So this is the bare bones, absolute minimum Luxem engine for a fire profile. I'll get into why later. We have 4 Light Weavers, 4 Gleaming Cut, 4 Luxem Sight. I don't need to talk about these. I'm not going to talk about them. But notice how these additional 12 slots add on to our 16 slots from earlier for a total of 28 slots. This means that way over a third of our deck is allocated to just running the absolute core essentials for Luxem. Now I want to talk a little bit about packages before I talk about, no, not packages, but more the idea of what a card is supposed to do in your deck. Since we're on Luxem, I'm going to jump to that part specifically. This is my kill package. I don't actually see Uncover the Plot as a stabilization tool, as other players might. Striking Luminance is the card I want to see to kill someone with 8 cards in hand. And Eliane is the card I'm testing. I've tried her at 2. She seems a little bit bricky to me. I can see her being run at 2, but for now I'm doing just this. But think of it this way. This package says that I'm going to level to 3 efficiently. It says I'm going to level to 1 efficiently. It says I might miss my level 2 on enter resolution, and I'll get to that in a bit. But we get to 1, we get to 3 very efficiently, and once we get to 3, we get to kill by aiming to hit one of these 5 cards, or at least one of these 3 cards, in addition to our Lightweaver's Assault to close out the game. That is our game plan, simplified in a nutshell. Notice how this is 5 cards. It's 1 card away from 6 cards, which is 10% of our deck. That's good. We don't want to see Eliane and Striking Luminance in our opening hand. We actually want to reduce the chances of seeing one of these cards as we begin the game, and we want to maximize the chances of seeing one of these cards. So I actually like these ratios at 5 or 6 here. Let's talk about the other half of Luxem. We need to stay alive. So let's take a look at this. We have 4 Resolute Stand, and an optional 2 Vanish from Sight. I was running 0 copies of Vanish from Sight until yesterday. It's currently in my build, but I'm going to get into it in a little bit. This is 6 cards that basically say, if you are running combat damage, I have a way to stop you. And again, these 6 cards go into a 10% range of we're very unlikely to see this in our opening hand. We might see 1, but we're not going to see 2 very consistently, which is good because we don't actually want to see these until later in the game. The other package is 4 Incap and 4 Topsy. Now, 4 Incap and 2 Topsy. You can run 3 Topsy if you like. I think that's a good meta call right now. But again, I'm mirroring my anti-ally with anti-spell damage. Incap and Topsy mean that if my opponent relies on spell damage to kill me, by the late game, I should have at least drawn 1 of them, because I've gone through at least 12 cards by then, and there's a good chance I'm drawing 2 of them. So by the late game, I'm going to have at least 1 copy of these sections in my hand, and I might have 1 copy of these cards in my hand, and that's exactly the ratio and the feel that I want. If you want, you could bump up your ally hate cards from 6 to 8, maybe 2 more Vanish from Sight like that. And what that essentially does is you're just shifting over and increasing the chances of hitting ally hate and decreasing the chances of hitting spell hate. So that's my package so far. Now I'm going to go into kind of the grind game aspect. I'm going to remove the sheet so I get a better view at the next section. We've got our Stay Alive cards against allies. We've got our Stay Alive cards against spells, but we have to do something in the middle of the game. These are only really late game cards or transition into late game cards. We're not going to survive if an aggro deck starts killing us. So what do? I currently run a 2 Sadie, 2 Thieving Cut, 2 Planted Explosives package. Again, why these numbers? It's because it's 6. I like to see 6 of this, 6 of this, 6 of this, because that way, if I draw the card that I don't want to see in a matchup, I can use it as cost for the cards I do want to see in a matchup. But if I double down and make this, I don't know, 10 to 12, I'll consistently draw those cards, which is something I want for my engine piece, but not something I want for my tech pieces. And the reason I have these at the ratios that they are, I have 2 Planteds because Planted hits 4. This kills Aeson Protectors. This kills Phosphones. Thieving Cuts hits for 3. This kills regular allies. Sadie hits for 2. That kills the Slimes. And you can also use them in combination with each other. So if they have a 5 health ally, you can do Thieving Cut into Sadie. Sadie gives me the prep counter so that I can actually afford to run the Thieving Cuts and Planteds. So these are generally good mid-game cards. Planted is also an end-game combo piece if you use it with other sources of damage. Thieving Cut can be a combo piece if you're using Insignia the Korhazi. And Sadie as a whole is just a good influence neutral card. And that's the package that I'm running. So again, 6, 6, 6, because I don't want to see them early game, but I do want to see at least 1 of them throughout the game. Now I mentioned earlier that we're not able to actually level to 2 and get the payoff efficiently. That's why I'm running 4 Exploit Vulnerability. I really like Juggle Knives in the slot, but unfortunately right now I think since it's an open meta, I like to keep my options open. So if Exploit Vulnerability gives me the access to kill Shenju, I can pay for Merkblade and exploit Vulnerability on myself just to kill the Shenju. If Sadie sticks on the board, I can exploit Sadie and kill a big guy. You won't get the agility trigger, but you'll still be able to kill. So if you take a look, I'm actually missing a lot of the neutral cantrip package that I keep talking about in the videos, and that's on purpose. Because if you look at the amount of assassin actions I have laid out in front of us, we have a lot. We have 4 neutral assassin. These are the perfect cards to see for level 2, but we also have 2 Vanish from Sight for 6. We also have 4 Incap for 10. We also have 2 planteds, and 2 thieving cuts. That's 14. The chances of us actually resolving a assassin card prior to leveling up to 2 is very high, because now we're hitting that 15 number, which is 25% of our deck. If you look at it a different way, and I move the cards like this, now suddenly you see 25% of my deck, oh sorry, I forgot the end caps, 25% of my deck is a level 2 pickup card already. So I don't need more neutral cards if I'm already hitting this number. If I am choosing to remove the Vanish from sites, suddenly I'm at 12. I need 3 more to hit 25%. I might be inclined to actually include Juggle Knives, or I might be inclined to increase the amount of Thieving Cut. But that's the decision making that you want to make as a whole, because cards don't exist in a vacuum. They exist within the context of the entire build. So now I've laid it out so that I can say, hey, I've got a 10% chance of ally hate, a 10% chance of spell hate, a 10% chance of killing the things on the board that are going to kill us. I've got a small amount of consistency here. And the reason we can go smaller is because we're running more angelic channelings here. Angelic channeling will allow us to dig prereq as well as opponent's end step. Now we have to go to our last 5 cards, and that is completely up to you. So the cards I'm running here are 2 Excals, which I think everyone needs to run, because anyone worth their salt and trying to tech against Luxem is going to run the teapot. So I'm going to run 2 Excals as dedicated hate against the hate that kills us. This kills Safeguard Amulet, so we can go for gain. This kills a teapot. This kills Nullifying Mirror. In theory, if we get really hated on this format, I would bump this up to 3 immediately. So there's that. I'm going to put this in this section over here. I'm currently on 2 Return to the Archive and 1 Turbocharge. Turbocharge is just good so that you have something to do with your Power Cell token after your backup charger. It's just a good piece. You could choose not to run it. You can also choose to bump it up, but I like mine at 1 exactly. Return to the Archive I think is very high value, but in testing, I found it actually conflicts with a lot of our deck. When we're leveling up to 2, and we want to do something like Thieving Cut, and we have both Thieving Cut and Return to the Archive in hand, you can choose one or the other. You can't choose both. And unfortunately, if you choose either of them, when you level to 3, you only have 1 prep counter, and you cannot Striking Luminance to kill immediately. And that is actually kind of a big deal. If we're running Return to the Archive and Thieving Cut and Striking Luminance, we can't rely on seeing 2 Sadie and 2 Uncover in order to make the prep gen. So we have to run Insignia of the Korhazi. And that's the logic. If you are running Return to the Archive and Striking and Thieving and Planted, you must have Insignia. Otherwise, you won't have enough to actually resolve Striking, and you need to resolve Striking to win the game a lot of the time. So now everything starts to fit together a little bit more cleanly if you start to talk out loud about your ratios. I'm running Insignia of the Korhazi. That also means that it synergizes with the Exploit Vulnerability. In multiple games in the last few weeks, I have resolved Exploit Vulnerability pre-recollection. In response, triggers the Insignia, so I draw 2 cards off Exploit Vulnerability. Suddenly, my Exploit Vulnerabilities are becoming turbocharges in terms of card generation. So that's 1 material deck slot done. I might as well throw this for visibility. I've got my Zander lineage out at the top here. I've got Lost Providence. I've been testing with Quicksilver Grail. I think we're a little bit too early in the format for that right now. And now let's talk about offense. Backup Charger, Prism Spire Scepter, and Chalice of Blood. These are the cards that we use to hit our breakpoints, going from 6 to 8, going from 8 to 10, going from 11 to 13. Those are our key breakpoints. Going from 6 to 8 means that we can do a Striking Luminance combo, which cannot be a Striking like Elian combo. So 8 is the point we have to hit. Going from I was able to go from 2 cards in hand to like a full 6, 8 card hand within a turn and a half, just because of the way I can layer my channelings and whatnot. Because we have channeling now, we have to have at least one of these options late game, just because we want to be able to crack the Lost Providence, draw a card, and then pay for one of these in order to draw the next card off of a channeling trigger. So I like to have 2 of these available to me at all times. Backup charges required. Prism's Bioceptor is optional, but I'm choosing it. Insignia means that with 3 outlets here, we never really have to worry about putting cards down, which also means the value of Sadie decreases. So if the format changes enough, the first things that get cut are the Sadies, and the next things that get cut are probably a mix of the Planteds, depending on the format. But the piece that I haven't talked about yet is the Return to the Archive. I've seen some players cutting it. I agree and disagree with them. I think the Return to the Archive and Merkblade package is very strong, but we can't allocate more slots to it. If you take a look, we already have 8 dead cards late game. With Return to the Archive, we have 10 dead cards late game. That's like a great portion of our deck that is completely useless once we've hit level 3. If I add a 3rd Return to the Archive, yes, I will see them earlier. I might see them more consistently, but is the +1 worth bricking more than having more than 10 cards in your deck allocated to being bricks? Well, if you're a Magic player, the answer is yes, you're okay with that, because you can always use your bricks to pay cost. You can always use your Sadies to pay for your Topsies. And that's okay, but for me, I want all of my pieces to be consistently having a role in the game, and Return to the Archive is kind of a high roll card, in my opinion. You can try it at 4 if you like. Come back to me and let me know how it goes, but I have a feeling that 3 or 4 Return to the Archive, bumping up our floating memory package, is going to hurt a lot more than, especially if you have to cut any of these down, because we're already not seeing them consistently. In my last video, I mentioned we have to see an additional 6 cards just to guarantee Dungeon Guide. If Dungeon Guide's at 4, and we need to see more cards to see Dungeon Guide, we actually need to see even more cards to see a Gentle Respite. So cutting a Gentle Respite is a no-go. Cutting a Channeling for a Return to the Archive doesn't make sense to me. The reason is because you can't use Return to the Archive to go to level 1. So you don't actually want to see Return to the Archive going to level 1. You want to see Return to the Archive going to level 2, which means it's not really floating memory going to 1. It's floating memory for the purpose of Creative Shock, but you don't want to see this turn 1. You want to see this turn 2 or later. And later in the game, if you have a matchup where, for example, a Safeguard Amulet's not useful, you could, in theory, make a Safeguard Amulet and then kill it with Return to the Archive to heal health in the face of allies, but it's kind of low value in that case. I do see the benefit of cutting it, but in my particular build right now, I prefer to keep it. Just because I think the value of being able to high roll here is very strong. I see Return to the Archive in the same category as Turbocharge, because all of these are kind of high roll cards, right? If I'm in a matchup where I know they're not going to kill me in 4 or 5 turns, the first thing I do is Backup Charger and Turbocharge, and now I have seen more bad cards. The more bad cards I see, the better it is when I level up, and I banish those bad cards for actual value in terms of getting my level up progress. So let's talk about offense and defense in the form of Regalia. I actually see, like I mentioned, Chalice of Blood, you might think it's an offensive card, but I actually see it more of a defensive card. It's weird because aggro will get you to 20. You can manipulate yourself to 20. We don't have Juggle Knives here, so we can't do it as easily, but we can always Light Weavers to hit ourselves to 20. But the thing about aggro is that they cap out at maybe 19 health, 15 health on Spirit, 19 health on the level 1, maybe 20 some odd health. But if you're able to ever see Light Weavers and 10 cards, you win. Because pre-recollection, you'll flip Light Weavers, you'll deal 2 damage, You'll recollect to your 10 cards in hand, you'll do the Light Weavers combo, and then they die because that's 16 damage. 16 plus 4 is 20. 20 is more than 19. But hitting 10 is really hard in aggro. So Chalice of Blood means that you can tank the 20 damage, pop it, maybe with Serene if you need to, and then kill them on the crackback without the need of any of these pieces. So you can afford to take out all of these cards for sideboard slots if you want to. You might want to keep the uncovers. You can afford to take these out for cards that will actually keep you alive because you know that in your back pocket you can always kill them on the crackback, but only if you have Chalice of Blood to actually draw into that 10-point range, because you might get 6 to 8 cards against aggro. It's really hard to get 10 cards, but Chalice of Blood will get you there because you only need to have 7 cards in hand. You just crack the Chalice of Blood 7 to 8 to 9, you draw for turn to 10, and then they're dead. So I actually see Chalice of Blood being a defensive card in this way because the best defense is a good offense, and the best kind of offense, the best stun, the best CC is death. If you kill them, you win. The defensive cards I find are actually cards like Luxem's map, because it defends against your variance of dying because you didn't see any damage. The likelihood of not seeing damage is low, but the likelihood of not seeing enough damage is kind of high. Lux map means that if you're up against a threat that needs more damage to kill them, you can afford to do something like search for a second Light Weaver's Assault for that last little bit of combo. You could theoretically search for a Luxem site for an Elian combo. Now that decks are becoming more resilient, I'm finding myself doing interesting lines. Like the other week, I resolved a hand of playing Elian, uncover the plot, reveal 2 Luxem sites, and then Light Weaver's Assault on top of that, and it was Giga Death. So Lux map helps us in the matchups where we need to see more damage, and we definitely need to do that in a fast manner before we die. That's a defensive option in my books. Safeguard Amulet is another defensive option. That's the slot I'm cutting. I will be testing Floating Blade. I think Floating Blade has a lot of potential. I haven't had enough time to test it. I think, like in Teamfight Tactics, if you played it, no matter the meta, no matter the comp, you want every single good comp has a good mix of offense and defense. And this is the same kind of concept. If we go too heavy on the offense and lack on defense, then we're just going to die. But if we don't have enough offense, then we're not going to be able to close out the games in a meaningful way, in a meaningful time, before they can just draw their God card and kill us all. So this kind of split of defense, I'm getting mixed up here. So, I guess Chalice of Blood is depending on how you want to define it. But these ratios make sense to me, but more importantly, they're justified in my eyes because of how I've numbered the ratios. In a format where we see more spell damage, I can see us changing Asadi towards more spells. In a format where we see more allies, I can see us taking a Topsy and reallocating it towards the ally package. In a format where we want to be more, more aggressive against the top deck, we could take out Vanish from Sites, maybe a Sadie, put in some main board options against the top deck. It's not going to affect the ratios too much. In a format where we need more space, Merc Blade and Return to the Archive can come out. In a format where we need to see more X-Scales against Razor Gale or Polar Depths with a Nullifying Mirror or a Nullifying Lantern, we can afford to change things around to hit that. As you can see, there's a lot of different ways to build the deck, but ultimately, it's your skill expression that will pilot this deck to a victory at locals. So it also depends on how you want to play the deck. If I tell you the correct ratio of fogs is 6 or 8 or 4, that's not true, because maybe it works for me, but it might not work for you, and it might not work for your locals, and your locals may or may not be representative of the meta as a whole. So at the end of the day, what I want to present you with is essentially a framework of just justifying your cards. Don't put cards in because they're good. Put cards in because they work within the particular engines of your deck. and ask yourself, why am I putting like 10 cards for fog when it's going to brick me against the spell damage decks? Why am I doing the same for spell damage? Why do I want more damage? Why do I want less damage? As long as you have a justification and it makes sense, that's good enough. You don't need to follow a particular guideline, you just need good justification. And with that, I really look forward to giving you an actual deck profile. I'm not going to give you anything until after my regional season, most likely. But with this in mind, I really hope that you'll have a lot of fun testing with your ratios. Get back to me with whatever ratios you're testing, and I wish you all the best. Until next time, bye.